32 teams in 32 days. This is day number 8, the Carolina Panthers episode. Let's welcome in Jared Feinberg, Panthers superfan, NFL draft analyst for Blue Chip Scout, and host of the Draft Net podcast. Jared, what's going on?
Nothing much, man. I've been working hard for Blue Chip Scouting, getting some articles out lately, some mock drafts. Also been evaluating the 2021 draft class, starting to really dive into some of the more lesser known prospects. So starting to catch up here.
That's awesome, man. So Panthers weren't messing around this offseason. They stressed depth, stars, team fits. They pretty much did it all trying to give Matt Rule a team that he desires and the team that he thinks he can win with. I'll start with this. So Matt Rule coming in and making an immediate impact on the field, but not before he makes an impact off the field in the meetings and personnel decisions, as we all saw with their draft last year. Why was this the direction that they went in, and why do you think it played out pretty well in the 2020 season?
I've always thought this, like Marty Hurney has always been like, he drafts well in the first round. We all know that. He is really good when he was a GM for the Carolina Panthers, he drafted very well in the first round. After that, he struggled to hit on prospects after the first round. So I believe there was a little mix of Hurney was giving in his opinion, but Rule wanted his own guys as well. So sort of Rule was making the decisions for the draft selections after the first round. I think 100% Marty Hurney drafting Derek Brown was his decision. After that, I think it was more of a 50-50 split between Hurney and Rule, but I wouldn't be shocked if I heard one day, Rule had the entire keys the rest of the way for the 2020 draft class. And they did a terrific job with that draft class, going all defense, which they definitely needed to do after the 2019 season. And now they have the makings of maybe a couple years down the road being one of the best defenses in the NFL. You could see the potential with Jeremy Chinn, Yetur Gross-Matos, Derek Brown, Braven Roy flashed a bit when he was able to play. Troy Pride had he was inconsistent, but again, you're going to expect that for a rookie cornerback in the NFL, especially a fourth rounder, I believe Troy Pride was. So great group of guys. Forgot to make, like I mentioned, Derek Brown. I expect him to really come onto the scene as one of the better defensive tackles or nose tackles in the entire league.
So Hassan Reddick brought him over from Arizona on a one-year deal. Only signed a one-year deal as did a lot of people. What were your thoughts on the contract, and what is he going to bring to Carolina, that D-line with already Brian Burns, Derek Brown, Gross-Matos, as you said?
You're going to see a rotation with Carolina's pass rush. Of course, you're going to have Brian Burns, Hassan Reddick probably as your two starters, but you're also going to have Yetur Gross-Matos rotating in there as he continues to develop into a really good pass rusher for the Carolina Panthers. Also expect Christian Miller, who was, I believe he was a fourth-round draft pick for the Carolina Panthers a couple years ago, same draft that he was with Brian Burns. Expect Christian Miller, he flashed a bit at Alabama. Injuries have really plagued him early on in his career, but I think if Christian Miller is healthy, he's going to make an impact on the field, especially in the rotation. I think that's how you're going to see Carolina's pass rush this year. You're going to see Brian Burns on the field a lot. Burns is going to be your top dog on defense. He is arguably their best player on defense. And with Hassan Reddick, now you have a chance of, okay, we have more versatility on defense. That's what Phil Snow likes on his defense, is versatile players that can do whatever they're needed to be asked to do. Hassan Reddick has dropped back into coverage as a linebacker. We all know he was a versatile prospect coming out of Temple. And now he's reunited with Matt Rule. I could see Hassan Reddick really breaking out next year again and really solidifying his place as a feared pass rusher in the NFL. He had a great year last year. And look, a good portion of those sacks came in one game, but throughout the season, Hassan Reddick was really good. I'm excited for Reddick. I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table. I think a 1-year deal is perfect for him. A good 1-year prove-it deal. If he does show enough in Carolina, he will definitely get another contract. But then again, Carolina's going to have to figure out, okay, how are we going to do Taylor Moton on the franchise tag, DJ Moore, Brian Burns in the future. You're going to have a lot of decisions to make, but I believe Hassan Reddick, a good year from him, he'll get another contract extension. And hopefully by that time, Carolina is really considered, okay, this is a defense that we should probably fear heading into the 2022 season.
So you, as you said, brought back Taylor Moton on the franchise tag. You signed Cameron Irving and Pat Ethelyn to contracts on day one of free agency. Obviously, it's a key point to protecting whoever's playing quarterback this season. We'll get to that later. But what do you think of the moves they made on the O-line this offseason? And talk to me a little bit about what the line looks like right now heading into the draft.
A lot of fans didn't like the moves, and rightfully so. You know, the stuff they've heard about Eflin or if I said his name correctly, I'm not sure, and Cam Irving. Those are two players that really struggled as starters, but again, they showed flashes and they're good spot starters. They're good depth for a good amount of reasons. They're going to provide depth all across the offensive line. Pat and Cam, they're going to do their thing. Depth players compete for starting jobs. I think that's what Matt Rule wants, is players that can force the starters to compete, and even those depth guys to even compete to be a starter at some point down the road during the 2021 season. After thinking about it, you know, I like the signings because, of course, like I mentioned, they're depth players more than likely. So, and it wouldn't be surprising if Elfin ends up starting at some point during the season. But I think offensive line needs to be a priority after the first round of the draft, or it could be a priority in the first round if the Panthers miss out on the quarterback, which we will talk about here in just a moment. But with the Panthers, I think it's important that you really add good young players to that offensive line. You got Taylor Moton. Hopefully you bring him back on a long-term extension after this season off the franchise tag, or you're able to re-sign him this summer. Who knows? But it's a big key to protect the quarterback, especially in today's NFL. And this is a good year to get offensive linemen in the draft for the past couple of years. Actually, last year we had a good offensive line draft. Panthers went on defense. This year we have a good offensive line class, and I expect the Panthers to really go after some of these good players in days 2 or 3. Hell, maybe even the first round with Rashawn Slater, Penei Sewell, maybe even Christian Darrisaw. And, you know, if they decide, I hope they don't decide to trade back in the first round. If they don't find anyone available, trade back, get Tevin Jenkins possibly. If they trade back that far, which I highly doubt. But this is a really good offensive line class from what I've seen so far through my evaluations of the 2021 draft class. And I expect the Panthers to really go in on that group.
So losing Curtis Samuel hurts. Losing that type of speed and youth is very hard to replicate, except we're heading into a draft with more speed and youth at receiver maybe ever. How will that hole be filled, do you think? Does someone have to step up on the roster right now, or will it be stressed this April in the draft?
Well, the Panthers end up signing David Moore this offseason, former Seattle Seahawk, the connection there with Scott Fitter. I expect him to take over that slot role for the Carolina Panthers, but I would not be surprised at all if they took a wide receiver in either day 2 or day 3 of the draft, depending on how the rest of the offseason goes or throughout the next couple of weeks, because there are still some key free agents out there on the open market. I can't really, off the top of my head, think of those names. But when you look at the 2021 wide receiver class, it's absolutely stacked, top to bottom. And I tell people this all the time: fans of teams that have a need at wide receiver, but also have big needs at like cornerback or offensive line or whatever. Let's take the Eagles, for example. They may take a cornerback at 12, either Horn, Surtain, Farley, maybe even Newsom the second, possibly. And if they go that direction, I wouldn't have a problem with it, because look how much depth you have in day 2. You may have some guys you have graded in the first round that end up lasting to day 2. And now you're in a good spot if you're Philadelphia. So for Carolina, I think a good thing that they need is depth at the wide receiver position. I think they need to have a good rotation at that position, just like we saw when Joe Brady was at LSU. They rotated their receivers in and out any chance they can get, and they produced. They need guys that can produce and also play football at a high level. I haven't really gotten deep into the wide receiver class yet. I've gotten to some of the top names like Dimey Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown. He could be a target in day 2, or if he ends up on to day 3. This is such a good wide receiver class with so many different types, so many different styles, speed, red zone threats, got like 6'5", 220-pound, insane catch radius guys. You have those types. You have the small guys that you can put at kick returner and just go crazy with. You got gadget guys all over the place. You got plenty of talent all throughout the draft at the wide receiver position. So I'm expecting them to at least touch on the position in the draft. I don't know when that will be. Will it be day 2? Will it be day 3? I would prefer day 3, because I think in day 2 you have some, if they go quarterback at 8, or if they even trade up, I think it's important that they go with some very, very crucial needs in day 2. I think day 3 would be a good spot. I like Cornell Powell potentially in day 3. I think he will be a good developmental receiver. He played well for Clemson later on in the season. No bias whatsoever, none. Just putting that out there. But with Cornell Powell, you can develop him into a really solid slot receiver. Hell, you can, if you let go of Robbie Anderson, he could be your wide receiver 2 down the road. So I think you get a talent like that, like Cornell Powell, or off the top of my head, Seth Williams. You develop him into a nice talent from Auburn. He can just dominate at the catch point if you want to. He's also a great athlete as well. You have some good players in day 3 of the draft.
Yeah, it's funny, Seth Williams. When I was scouting him, yeah, there's a lot to like. And then I kind of did my eval on him the day that he dropped that pass. I don't remember who he was playing. Do you remember the
Alabama
pass he dropped?
Alabama.
And I can't get that out of my head. So now when I look at Auburn, all I see is Anthony Schwartz. and just that speed. And, he flew during his 40, I think it was last week. But pick 8, we don't think any of the top 4 quarterbacks will be there. We think Mac Jones might be there. There's a million things that I can ask you, ranging from who do you want, who you think will be there, the impact the 49ers Dolphins trade had on everything. Just kind of talk to me a little bit about your thoughts on pick 8, and I guess we'll go from there.
The Panthers are, well, they're in the tough spot here. They're at pick 8, and they're just outside the range for them to get one of the top 4 quarterbacks, one of the top 5 quarterbacks, to be honest with you, because now it's really narrowed down to Lawrence. Well, not really Lawrence, because he's probably going to be the first pick, presumably. Fields, Wilson, Lance, even Mac Jones. And look, I've gotten heat for criticism on Mac Jones. I don't hate Mac Jones at all. I like him as a player. I like him in late in the first round, when you have teams, playoff teams in that range that have good talent all over their roster and good coaching staffs. But when you talk about a guy that could take your team over the top, he's not that guy. I don't see it. But at pick 8, they really kind of screwed themselves last offseason when they signed Teddy Bridgewater, because I was talking to Joe Marino when he was on the Draft Up podcast the other day, draft analyst for the Draft Network, and he was telling me that, the Panthers didn't have to sign Teddy Bridgewater if they were going to go all in for Trevor Lawrence. They didn't have to. They could have started Will Grier or PJ Walker throughout the season if they really wanted to go for Trevor Lawrence. With Teddy Bridgewater, he was good enough to get you to help you win games, but not to the point where he should go and take you to the promised land, of course. Right. He's a good low-level starter that you can win in spite of. And he was good enough to get the Panthers to 5 wins, 8-8, or not 8-8, 8th overall pick, and just outside the range to get one of the top quarterbacks in the draft. If they had really just gone in with the whole tank thing, now I don't believe tanking exists, honestly. I don't think teams purposely lose, or purposely lose for better draft position. But when you talk about like what they had in front of them going into the season, they could have had an opportunity at drafting Trevor Lawrence number 1 overall. They could have started Will Grier and PJ Walker, probably struggled throughout the season, and they end up with the 1st overall pick. That's a total guarantee. That could have been a total guarantee for them. They would have been in a great position to get Justin Fields, Zach Wilson without having to trade up for and give up capital for any of it. And also they kind of screwed themselves in the draft last year when they decided to stick at pick 7 and take Derek Brown. They could have traded back for more assets, more draft capital, so then they can feel better about trading up without having to sacrifice so much in this year's draft. Now, because they're stuck at 8, San Francisco traded up for the number 3 pick. They gave up a ton of assets, 3 first-round picks the next 3 years. That's incredible, including this year. So with Carolina, you have to think, okay, let's hope Atlanta doesn't take a quarterback. If Atlanta doesn't take a quarterback and Denver doesn't trade up, we're set. I've had Lions fans tell me, well, we could end up taking a quarterback at 7. I don't see that happening because they have Jared Goff. I think they're going to roll with Goff throughout the rest of his contract. Then they'll draft a quarterback at some point. I think they're just going to build the roster around him and see how it goes. I personally don't believe Denver is going to trade up because I think they're going to stick with Drew Lock. Lock has, he has shown promise, but he's been inconsistent. He's been hurt. So I think Denver gives Drew Lock another opportunity, and he has a great roster around him, great receivers, good offensive line, coaching. I hope it can be good next year. And, if Drew Lock ends up doing all right, I think Denver will be fine in terms of being a playoff team. But Carolina better hope that Atlanta doesn't take a quarterback like Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, whoever's there at 4, and they take potentially Kyle Pitts. And, Panthers hopefully the Panthers can get their guy, either Justin Fields, Lance, Zach Wilson. Definitely not Mac Jones. I'm all the way out of Mac Jones, like I previously said. And I voiced this on Twitter. Totally out on Mac Jones at number 8. The Panthers said that they're basically getting Teddy Bridgewater 2.0, and they're not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, so this has been – so you talked about the trade, and, obviously the offseason, draft season, very long. When you first found out that they'd be picking 8, most likely needing a quarterback, some had, a couple like Lance was always falling to 8 in January, February mock drafts. And then the end of February, March happened, and now he's going top 5. Same thing with Zach Wilson back in November. He was falling to Chicago. He was falling out of the first round. And now December comes around. He throws 6 touchdowns in the bowl game. He's the second pick. When did this first start being scary to you that you weren't going to get a quarterback? Like when did you start getting the feeling, okay, Fields is out of the question now, and maybe if something happens and he falls to 8, because I know you would love that. You're a big Justin Fields guy, and so am I. But when did it first start feeling that we're going to miss out, probably?
last week when San Francisco made that trade for the third overall pick, that's when it hit me like, oh, Panthers are screwed. They're screwed, more than likely. They will have to trade up if they fear Denver's going to try to go after a quarterback, or they can just sit at 8, hope and pray a quarterback lands to them. Now, about Fields dropping, the criticism around him is just dumb. It's absolutely dumb. I had to get this out of the way. Where on tape does Justin Fields struggle with processing the field? You look at his tape, there's not a single sign of him struggling with processing on tape. He is not just a first read guy. He can read the whole field. He can go through his progressions very well. There are some concerns, and these are valid concerns, that he is sort of a slow processor, but that's part of the offense. Because if you saw my tweet the other day of like an example of one of Ohio State's plays, like all the receivers are running options, basically. So option routes. That's all of Ohio State's offense. Fields is waiting for his guys to make a decision on the route, depending on the coverage, depending on the type of leverage a defender may have. So Fields is having to wait and hoping his offensive line can do the job, so then he can make the right read. And sometimes the first read is always open, and it was for a good amount, but he usually has to go through most of his progressions, and he does a great job doing it, does a great job, like taking what's in front of him. And I think that's what Trevor Lawrence struggled with in year 2 in his sophomore year. He struggled with taking what was in front of him. Same thing with Tua Tagovailoa. He struggled in his sophomore year, taking what's in front of him. Justin Fields has always been taking what's in front of him, even since the previous season in 2019, when he's just came on the scene, became one of the best quarterbacks in the nation. Now you're seeing, oh, he's not accurate, doesn't throw an accurate ball, can't process the field well, not good work ethic, blah, blah, blah. I've heard the total opposite. I've seen the total opposite of what that's being said. Now, I get some teams are trying to get prospects to fall, and maybe that's even Carolina saying that stuff about Fields just so they can get him at 8. Hopefully he falls there. But the criticism around Justin Fields is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. He will fall because of this criticism, of this false criticism, of the false narratives around him. That's all I have to say about that.
So it's so funny. I saw this on Twitter the other day. It's basically it was an analyst's guide to quarterback defamation playbook. When step 1 fails and you can't prove your point using tape and analysis, move on to step 2, which is inject the following talking points into all interviews. Number 1, last guy in, first guy out, which is exactly what happened with the whole Orlovsky thing. And you know, I don't blame Orlovsky. He actually likes Fields, and he tried to erase that narrative yesterday. He posted a film breakdown of Fields being able to go to his second, third read. But he was just reporting what was said to him, and I believe it was on the Dan Patrick show. So people have been saying about Justin Fields that he's the last guy in, the first guy out. I've heard there are some questions with insert quarterback names here, work ethic. Where is his desire to be a great quarterback? Just all this stuff that the BS that you just.
There's some stuff I want to say, but I really don't want to get into it because it may touch on some stuff that will make people uncomfortable. Not in a super bad way, but like something that definitely needs to be talked about. And I'll go ahead and talk about it. It's the racial bias we have with quarterbacks, and that's a big issue we've had for years with black quarterbacks, is that we label them in such a way, like Lamar Jackson. People were labeling him, oh, he's skinny and all that, blah, blah, blah. He should be a wide receiver at the next level. We're calling them raw quarterbacks. We're like first read only quarterbacks. We're calling them very limited. But when we talk about white quarterbacks, we're saying the opposite thing. Like, come on. I get people aren't trying to be like that, but we all have racial bias. And I don't know. I really don't know how really to explain this at the best level I can. But just make it the point of like people see things that may or may not be true. I can't really think of anything else to say about that. I'm worried I may say the wrong thing, so I'm gonna stay off of that right now.
So Carolina picking at 8, 39, 73, and 113 in the first 4 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about a little bit of the offensive line, wide receiver. What are some immediate needs? And I mean, we could basically turn this into a draft show. Who are some guys you like? Just a few, because I know you can name everyone, but we don't have time for that. So just a few guys at some position needs. We can talk about that a little bit.
A couple of names that come to mind. I think Liam Eckenberg, offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. I recently did my evaluation on him the other day, or actually, I think it was yesterday. I did my final evaluation on him. He got a 2nd round grade for me. He is as calculated and as technical of an offensive tackle as you're going to get, and he does such a great job of masking his limitations as an athlete that I think he could be a really good offensive tackle at the next level. I was tempted to tweet this out yesterday. I'm like, Liam Eckenberg, just play style wise, and just thinking of previous offensive tackles that have been able to mask their limitations as an athlete and perform at a high level. Mitchell Schwartz comes to mind. He's not the best athlete, but he is a damn good offensive tackle, very good technician, knows where to hit his strikes, his punches, knows how to create leverage, make movement at the line of scrimmage. He is so good at doing that. And in the same way with Liam Eckenberg, that's where my play style comes from. Now, I'll just tell people this right now. Do not force pro comparisons. If you feel comfortable with putting a pro comparison on a prospect, go right ahead, but don't force it. And for me, I thought about it for a little bit. I actually watched a couple of games of Mitchell Schwartz yesterday just to see, okay, am I thinking this right? Is Liam Eckenberg a little bit like Mitchell Schwartz? And he kind of is, and that's a prospect I'm looking forward to see, okay, which team is going to really luck out at getting Liam Eckenberg in day 2 if he ends up falling to day 2, because there are a lot of offensive tackle needy teams in day or late in the first round, like the Kansas City Chiefs. So Eckenberg could end up going to the Chiefs at 31. The Panthers will probably miss out on him there, but in the mock draft I did the other day for the Carolina Panthers 7-round mock draft, I had Eckenberg going to them with the 2nd overall pick. 3rd round, I could see guys like I heard a name flying around, Jamar Jefferson out of Indiana, safety there. I've heard his name starting to fly around a little bit, and I will have to check on his tape here soon, but that's a name I've heard flying around. Richie Grant out of UCF. I recently did his evaluation. Very explosive, rangy safety. He can play out of control at times, but when he is in control, man, he is so fun to watch. Great ball skills, good range. He can come down and play physical at the line of scrimmage if you need him to. He's a fun player to watch. And, and I also compared him to Trey Boston. He reminds me a lot of Trey Boston in a way, like Boston also kind of plays out of control, but when he's under control, he can lay the hammer. He can lay the hammer if he needs to. He has good range as well. Especially a couple years ago when he was with Carolina, or even during his second tenure with Carolina, first and second tenure. He showed good range, ball skills, physical at the line of scrimmage. That's just the type of player I like in my secondary. You match Grant with Jeremy Chin. Woo, that's fun. That's going to be a fun thing to watch. I like that there. I'm trying to think who was my 4th pick in my mock draft. It's coming blank to me for some reason. I should know this stuff. I wrote the damn article myself, but those are some of the guys I really like in days or in the first, or not the first, in the second or third round. I haven't really gotten to really the fourth round prospects. I haven't graded anyone the fourth round just yet, but once I do, I'll then realize, okay, I'm starting to really get in here into this draft class.
Yeah, man, Jared, it was awesome having you on. We talked about some Panthers offseason stuff, a lot about the quarterbacks, little sneak peek of some of your favorite draft prospects. Make sure to follow Jared. Jared, what's your ad on Twitter?
JRod NFL Draft, and I almost said JRod Draft Scout. That used to be my old Twitter handle, but JRod NFL Draft is my current Twitter handle at the moment.
Make sure to follow him there on Twitter. Follow me at Jake Sirkus. Lots of good stuff from Jared. Jared, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.